New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who saw soaring popularity during the coronavirus pandemic, is now facing calls to resign after some former aides accused him of sexual harassment. According to the New York Times, a second former aide claims the Democrat repeatedly asked her questions about her sex life while she worked for him last year. She says it all happened late last spring during the height of the state's fight against COVID-19. Yesterday, Governor Cuomo apologized for his actions, saying he never intended to offend anyone or cause any harm. Jericka Duncan reports.
Vlad and Anne-Marie, the governor says he's now turning over the investigation to the state attorney general. This after she denied his original request to choose a private investigator. Now, the attorney general is expected to have full investigative authority and also oversee a law firm that will have the power to subpoena in this case. Charlotte Bennett laid out allegations of harassment against Governor Andrew Cuomo in the New York Times, events that she says took place over several months. In one encounter last June, Bennett said Cuomo asked if she was romantically involved, whether she was monogamous in her relationships, and if she had ever had sex with older men. The 25-year-old former executive assistant added, "I understood that the governor wanted to sleep with me and felt horribly uncomfortable and scared." Yesterday, the governor apologized, writing, "I now understand that my interactions may have been insensitive or too personal. Some of the things I have said have been misinterpreted as an unwanted flirtation. To the extent anyone felt that way, I am truly sorry." Alessandra Biaggi is chair of the state Senate's Ethics Committee and worked in the governor's office in 2017.
He's actually saying that he meant for those words to be playful, and there is no realm of playful when a governor of a state asks a young staffer who is 25 years old if she has sex with older men or if she has sex outside of her relationship. That is not only inappropriate, it is abusive.
The allegations have led to swift calls for an investigation from many prominent Democrats, including President Joe Biden.
President Biden has been consistent that he believes that every woman should be heard, should be treated with respect and with dignity.
New York Attorney General Letitia James will lead that investigation into Bennett's claims and those of another former aide, Lindsey Boylan. In a post last week, Boylan alleged Cuomo once kissed her on the mouth without permission. Cuomo has denied all of Boylan's claims.
That behavior from the governor is the exact behavior that prevents us from having good governance. It impacts policy. The lack of just being able to acknowledge that either mistakes are made or that certain behavior is harmful to others is highly problematic of someone who holds the office that is the highest office of the state of New York.
State Senator Biaggi said a big concern for her is that in the past, governors have had a lot of power when it comes to investigations within the state. She says she's hopeful that the Attorney General's involvement in this case will lead to more transparency. Vlad and Anne-Marie?
All right, Jericka, thank you. So for more on this, let's bring in Alyssa Katz. She is the deputy editor for The City, an independent nonprofit newsroom covering New York that has been following the Governor Cuomo story quite closely. So thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
Your paper's reporting claims that these harassment allegations, they follow years of public warning signs and anti-misconduct training that the governor mandated. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, Cuomo, I think the nation really saw this kind of personality style during his famous, coronavirus briefings. I mean, Cuomo can be very kind of talkative, frank, and kind of aggressive verbally, right? This is something that he's known for in front of the cameras and behind the scenes. And so, reporters, including our reporter, Josefa Velasquez, had witnessed years of really awkward, uncomfortable, and in some cases pretty clearly inappropriate remarks, such as, and I can see the tweet up on the screen, "I want to see you eat the whole sausage," as he's inviting a female reporter at the New York State Fair to eat a large sausage sandwich. And, other examples, including one which we also talk about, where, the governor was pressed a few years ago when a male executive who had worked with him had been accused of sexual harassment. And Cuomo turned it around on the female reporter and said, well, this is a problem everywhere. Well, doesn't this happen in journalism? Why are you looking at government? So, you've had many years of Cuomo both acting in ways that really showed an insensitivity to women around him and women in general. And we talk about, Josepha talks about this too in the article, really using sensitivity to women's issues, women's rights, the need to deal with sexual harassment as kind of a political campaign issue and something his office made a very big deal about addressing. So for one of those items, starting way back in 2013, was to say, we're going to tackle sexual harassment. And in fact, the state now mandates that every worker in New York get sexual harassment training. And the governor's office told Josepha that indeed Cuomo himself has received this sexual harassment training that he required of all employees in New York. Clearly, if he did get that training, it did not stick because of the kind of conduct that is alleged and that he is in part admitted to. And we should talk about that. It includes stuff that, I've been through this training. And the training clearly says, do not do this. Do not make sexual remarks. Do not ask your coworkers. Certainly not someone who is, where you're their supervisor. Ask them about their sex life, their dating life. This is just, you don't need the training to know that that's not appropriate.
And as we just heard, the Attorney General rejected Governor Cuomo's proposal to choose a private investigator. Why is it, just explain to our viewers why it's so important that the AG's office handle this case over sexual harassment, and what do we know about the status of the investigation?
Yeah, so, initially, there were a few different versions of this over the weekend in quick succession that Cuomo floated. But initially, he said, OK, I'll call for an investigation. And then he referred it to a private law firm that is at which a close associate of his practices. And so even though, the case would have been going to a different attorney there, the conflicts are pretty clear. And the Attorney General, did not accept that or another offer that would have, or another proposal that would have had the state's chief judge, also a Cuomo ally, play a role in selecting the investigator. So now, the governor's finally relented, and now this investigation is fully with the state attorney general, who, even though Letitia James, the attorney general, initially was considered a close ally of Cuomo's when she was first elected a couple of years ago, she's since, I think, very much defined a distance from the governor, and particularly around the governor's response to coronavirus, and something we may have time to talk about, which is the underreporting systematically and deliberately of nursing home fatalities. So I think at this stage, political people on the political scene in New York do consider Letitia James, the Attorney General, to be sufficiently independent of Cuomo to be able to oversee such an investigation. But it would involve, I believe, also a private firm reporting to her office.
And so it's not just these allegations of sexual harassment. Others have accused the governor of threatening, bullying, creating a hostile work environment. There is, and even before this, there's the backdrop, and I know we'll hopefully get to this, but of the nursing home scandal in the early days of the pandemic. In your opinion, is this going to be create a significant challenge for the governor as he seeks another term?
It's a great question, and I think we will have to see how the investigation or investigations that the state legislature takes on its own, how those play out to really know how this affects Cuomo politically, with an election coming up in 2022. But I think that the incidents that you're referring to, for example, include verbal threats to Assemblymember Ron Kim, who recently had really challenged the governor on their underreporting of nursing home fatalities and on other issues. And when Kim first went, public about this stuff, Cuomo went and, according to Kim, basically threatened to ruin him. And now, we end up hearing more stories about the governor conducting himself in that manner. And to be honest, it's not entirely news in the sense that Cuomo is kind of notorious for calling up reporters, lawmakers, mayors, and yelling at them, right? Or basically trying to make it clear that they will regret it if they don't do the thing he wants them to do. And to a certain extent, I think that conduct can be defensible as just, this is part of, the executive's toolkit is to call up somebody and yell at them. But at a certain point, that yelling turns, certainly when it's accompanied by threats to ruin somebody, does turn a corner into abuse and potential misconduct. So I think that's going to be, while that's not the subject of a specific investigation that the Attorney General is going to be overseeing, I do think that that's, an important part of the backdrop here. But look, Cuomo has consistently polled well throughout the coronavirus crisis before these reports and issues really came to the fore. And the aspect of Cuomo's personality that has sort of surfaced in some of these incidents is also arguably related to some reasons why he is popular, right? Because he is somebody who says what's on his mind, has a kind of an aggressive stance on a whole lot of issues, and particularly he did in confronting the Trump administration on his virus response. He did in positioning himself as an aggressive fighter for New York. So the things that are hurting him right now, quite clearly, are also things that have helped him before. So we've yet to see how that plays out politically.
And Alyssa, we want to definitely ask you about the investigation over the nursing home deaths during the pandemic. But one final question on this investigation that the Attorney General is pursuing into Governor Cuomo's behavior. Do you think that, having covered him for as long as you have, do you think that he survives this? And the reason I ask that is because there have been other politicians, including another one from New York, from Queens, who eventually became president of the United States, who weathered all sorts of allegations around sexual abuse and misconduct, and pushed back hard. The supporters liked that he pushed back hard, and ultimately was elected president of the United States. But there have been others, like Senator Al Franken, who've been accused of sexual misconduct that does not rise to the level of the things, for example, President Trump was accused of, and he chose to resign. I wonder if in the environment that we're living in right now, that Governor Cuomo survives this, or that he does what many Democrats have always said is the right thing to do, which is to step back and resign.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'm glad you mentioned Al Franken. I mean, I think, clearly one thing Cuomo does have in common with Franken is that they are both Democrats and are therefore kind of under heightened scrutiny, since Democrats broadly, and certainly Cuomo specifically, have themselves established a very high standard and bar for sexual misconduct and harassment. And, in their response to Me Too. So, and I think that we have to see clearly what investigations reveal, although certainly the detailed accounts from both of the women who have brought, made public allegations about Cuomo are quite specific, are credibly backed up by, emails and texts and correspondence at the time of those incidents. So certainly there's certainly more than smoke here, right? There are certainly signs of fire. So whether or not Cuomo survives this depends in part on the political climate in New York, which is not only fully Democratic Party dominated at this point, although of course Republicans are out for blood, for Cuomo's blood specifically, and are also very critical of Cuomo. But because you have Democratic control and it's moving more to the left, and AOC, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has been a very, very big influence in New York, both in personally helping get some new state lawmakers elected who are very much, they are like her, young, progressive. Many of them are women. And even the ones that she didn't help directly get elected are styling themselves after her. And so the climate in New York is such that it may be hard for Cuomo to survive.
Let me just briefly ask you now about, well, not briefly because it's an important issue, the allegations that the governor is facing regarding this handling of nursing home deaths during the pandemic. That is being handled by the Department of Justice and the FBI. What are the latest developments there?
You know, I mean, we not much has happened since we have heard that the Department of Justice is looking at the nursing home numbers. I mean, look, Cuomo's administration has, from the beginning, underreported nursing home deaths, and it's sort of shocking that it took this long for that to become a scandal, because certainly in my newsroom and other newsrooms around the state, we were made very aware by the governor's office that they were not reporting nursing home resident deaths that happened to take place in hospitals. So in other words, if the nursing home resident was ill with coronavirus, went to a hospital, died at the hospital, they were not counted as a nursing home death. My organization, the city, reported it. Others reported this as well. And no one's, I mean, I guess because a lot was going on in the spring, no one really paid attention to that. And it was only once Ron Kim began to bring it up, but also even before that with, the state attorney general, James, who we talked about before, produced a report saying actually twice as many people in nursing homes died as you actually reported. And the other thing that happened is the Cuomo administration had been fighting freedom of information requests from news organizations and policy groups that were asking for the numbers of both how many nursing home residents died and how many had been transferred in from hospitals with coronavirus to nursing homes who might have spread additional infections. And so the courts ruled against the Cuomo administration. So he was basically forced into admitting what they had really covered up in the first place, which was how many people are actually dying or actually died in nursing homes. So, I don't know if this is, a personal opinion. I don't know if the Justice Department will find any criminal activity, in part because the Cuomo administration was so open that they were doing this. It's just bad counting. But, clearly it was a mistake, and they've as much as admitted that at this point, as Cuomo has also apologized for his sexual harassment as well.
All right, Alyssa Katz, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And we want to remind you that you can continue to follow this story on CBSN New York. Just download the free CBS News app or head over to cbsnews.com/live. There you can find all of our local CBSN streams.